Good evening, everybody. I say evening, it's 8 o'clock here in the UK. Thank you so much for joining me on the YouTube channel for Disclosure Team. This one is something I've been looking forward to quite some time now. This gentleman that we are speaking to tonight, I have been following his work for many years now. I have so much respect for the guy. So let's not waste any more time. I would love to introduce you to Mr. Stephen Bassett. You are muted, Steve. How are you, my friend?
I am unmuted. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Excellent.
Good, good. I got to say thank you so much for joining me. It means so much to me because I've been studying this subject for about a decade now, and I've been following your work for so long. So this really does mean so much to me. So I cannot thank you enough.
Always happy to talk to my good friends in the UK. Where are you based right now? Where are you?
I'm in England. I'm in the north. I'm in the north of England. Yeah.
Okay, because that looks like an American flag behind you there.
Well, I thought I'd bring up like the Capitol building and stuff because, you know, a lot of stuff that you deal with, it kind of represents that. So, you know, I try and utilize my backgrounds for the guests that I'm speaking with.
I see. Okay, no problem. No problem. Look, I hope we don't have an insurrection take place while we're on the air here. So
I hope not either. Well, do you know what? The first thing I would really love to dig into is just take us back to kind of the mid-90s, because I believe you were involved with Dr. John Mack at some point. Was that like in the early days of your connection to this subject, let's say?
Yeah, to say I was involved in John Mack would be a little bit. I volunteered for his organization that he had set up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, back in the early 90s, called the Program for Extraordinary Experience Research. He was doing research. He was working with actual contactees very early, obviously, and he wrote a book called Abduction: Human Contact with Aliens, which created quite a stir, particularly amongst the Harvard Illuminati. So they gave him a hard time, and he had to spend a lot of money to defend his work, which eventually they said, fine, go ahead. It was a disgrace for Harvard, which we'll have to answer to it one day. But in any event, I read the book and learned about the organization, and I wanted to get involved in this issue. I wasn't sure how, but I thought, maybe I could go volunteer. If you're willing to work for free, it's amazing how much easier it is for people to say, sure, come on. And though not that easy, anyway, I was able to do it. So I picked up everything and just headed to Boston, and I spent 4 months there, and that was my beginning. I met him a couple of times, talked with him. I was there during a very interesting period in his life, and then I left Boston, went down to Washington, D.C. to start the activist work.
Yeah, because it was only, what, a year later that you started the Paradigm Research Group. Is that right?
Actually, it was that same year. I arrived in Boston on January 26th. I left and arrived in Washington area on July the 4th. And I set up Paradigm Research Group very shortly thereafter.
What were your main goals initially when you first set it up? Did you have like a long-term goal, or was it just something that enabled you to get involved with kind of the subject?
Oh, there was a goal.
Yeah.
I had come to understand something very important, namely that this issue that I had been aware of since I was a kid, that I was quite convinced as a teenager was real, based just on the articles in the papers and so forth, the magazines. You read them and you go, well, this is extraterrestrial. I didn't have any built-in biases. I had no reason not to accept what I was reading. So it was clearly extraterrestrial, which was very exciting. And I was waiting to learn more. But of course, that just didn't happen. So the years and years and years. So when I made the decision to get involved, there was something in my thinking that was critical, which came to, I think, full fruition while I was in Cambridge with Peer, that the problem of this issue wasn't about science. It wasn't about evidence. we had the evidence. There was enough evidence to confirm that this phenomenon was extraterrestrial. So why isn't it on the front page of the New York Times on a regular basis? The problem was not political. It was political, not science.
Right.
What do I mean by political? It was the policy of the United States government to not confirm this, to keep it, how would you say, closely held, even to undermine efforts of the public to get to the bottom of it. It was a political problem, and therefore it needed a political solution. And well, that gets you into activism. And so I got involved in the activism to resolve the issue of the ET presence by political means. I didn't think it would take this long, I assure you. I thought it would be 5 years, 6 years, but that was the goal. I had almost no resources at all, though I did have a place to stay. I knew Washington fairly well. So I had a beginning, and I made a couple of decisions that were helpful. The key one was this: I want to get involved politically. I want to be an activist, but in order to do that, you have to get attention. How could I? There's a lot of ways to get attention. Most of them are bad, but I realized I had an easy one. I registered as a lobbyist for the extraterrestrial issue with the U.S. Congress, knowing that no one had ever done that because there's no money in it. And I knew that once that registration became known to the Washington Post, they were going to send a reporter. And that's exactly what they did. And they did an article, substantial article, front page, the business section. And that made me an activist. And from that point on, I was able to slowly get some attention and find ways to engage and talk about the issue, leading to conferences and interviews and what have you. But again, I didn't have much resources.
How did that feel? How did that feel at that time, with the stigma and the ridicule that was surrounding the subject? Because I mean, I think it was still quite prominent in those days when we're talking about the mid to late 90s. Did you feel that, or see it, or experience it?
Well, I knew there was ridicule, and I saw examples of it. The way I got underway, I was operating I was an individual. I wasn't out in the public much. I was operating pretty much by the internet, by the phone. I didn't experience any direct in my face stuff. It's also the case that by 1996, 97, things were starting to change. And it was clearly we were moving out of the era of full ridicule into something else. I came in right at the transition point, and so it continually got better as each year went by. And so I personally have experienced almost none in my face ridicule. Part of the reason is that my demeanor and the way I approach it doesn't invite it. And so most people sort of get, I think, the idea that don't. And fine. And that's the way you have to. I mean, I came up with a concept years ago I call the intellectual ghetto. And the truth embargo was created literally to make the world of ufology an intellectual ghetto, where anybody that was involved in that, thought about it, cared about it, quote UFO, was thrown into that ghetto, and you had to live there. All right, you couldn't live somewhere else. You had to live in that ghetto. Yeah. The walls were not made out of brick and mortar. We've seen that before, but ridicule. And so I realized that, and I knew that I had been tossed into that ghetto. That didn't mean you had to act like you were in an intellectual ghetto. Right. But not surprisingly, for a lot of people, they sort of, how would you say, they responded to that by playing that role without intention. And so one of the things I realized is, look, these walls are made out of ridicule, not brick and mortar. And so I'm going to act as if there are no walls. Right. And so essentially, I'm going to treat the issue the way it's supposed to be treated. I'm going to act in that fashion and see how that goes. Now, what does that mean? It means, for one thing, you don't buy into the language. You don't apologize You make clear assertions. And so I tried to change the language over the years, because the language that existed regarding this issue when I entered '96 was pretty much the language that the truth embargo managers wanted.
Yeah.
In other words, you were supposed to say certain things in certain ways. And at the center of this was the acronym UFO. UFO was the key to the door to the ghetto. Once you said UFO, boom, you're in. And so I tried to move away from that. I tried to act as if this is a legitimate issue, and I wouldn't accept those that wanted to deny that, in a sense. In other words, deny me the ability to act that way. It's complicated, but this is how I approached it. And so registering as a lobbyist was a way to do that. In other words, this is an issue of great importance. Why isn't there a lobbyist? Every other issue you imagine has one. Well, I signed up.
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
I mean, 1997, I mean, 1 year later from, well, I suppose that first year, you're talking about 95, but through 96 with Paradigm Research, but into 97 were the press and congressional briefings with CSETI, Dr. Greer, but also Francis Barwood with the Phoenix Lights case. Like, can you just talk a little bit on those kind of things and how you moved into those areas?
Well, yeah, again, when I say that 96 was kind of a turning point, a significant turning point in this issue in many, many ways. And the history will show this. First of all, Bill Clinton, I'm sorry. As of 96, the Rockefeller Initiative was wrapping up during the year that I entered this field. All right. In other words, I come in July of 96. The Rockefeller Initiative had been going on since March of 1993, but no one knew about it. Virtually not publicly known, though it wasn't a secret. And so that created a basis for the political engagement, but I didn't even know it. So that was wrapping up. He won the election. Then the Phoenix Lights events take place. I think it's March of 97. That was significant. So some very important developments were happening just as I'm coming into the field. Frances Barwood is the political response to that. She became very well known because she did the right thing. She simply pointed out, why aren't we hearing about this? Why aren't we talking about this in the city council at Phoenix? And they didn't want to do that, but she went public and got a lot of press, and that was a political response. I engaged with her, talked with her. So that was happening, and then something else was happening very important at that time. It was the rise of Art Bell.
Right.
Art Bell was a long-standing radio personality who had been doing talk shows forever. He was a pro. A lot of his stuff had been political. He was sick of politics. He decided to try another genre. And in a way, responding to, I think, what he saw as developments, he creates the concept of the Art Bell show, Coast to Coast, dealing with the paranormal. And he dealt with the paranormal. He dealt with a fairly broad range of things. However, not surprisingly, the ET issue really was dominating. It was the key issue. And he was successful. He had a successful show with a very large audience. And so circa the mid-1990s, particularly 96, 97, 98, all of a sudden, people like myself had this program they could go on and talk for hours. I think he was doing a 5-hour show there for a while, I believe, at least 4, might have been 5. And so if you wanted to talk about the politics of this subject, for the first time really ever, though there were a couple of shows in the past, but certainly nothing like this audience, where you could go on and talk about 2 hours about this, and he allowed it to happen. In other words, Art didn't like politics, but the politics of, I guess you could say, ET issue was another matter. And so I started going on the Art Bell show, as did others. And now all of a sudden we had this multi-million audience that we could present these ideas to, that can seed them into the public mindset about the fact that, as I said earlier, the problem, folks, why you're not hearing the truth from the U.S. government is not because there's not enough evidence. It's because the government has a policy not to tell you. And I came up with the name for that policy called the truth embargo. And then that was a language issue. Again, activism is very much about language. If you need the accurate, correct language in order to move things forward, if you use the language the government provides to you, you're serving their policy, not yours. And so UFO cover-up served the government's embargo because it missed the mark. It criminalized the people inside the national security structures that are defending the country. That just alienates them. And it wasn't true. Plus, it had UFO in it, which was the core, the centerpiece of the ridicule process. So I came up with the term truth embargo, which is what it is. And I'm putting that out. Initially, though, we talked about the politics of UFOs. And then I came up with another term, disclosure. Not small d disclosure.
Big D.
Stephen Greer put that in play all through the early 90s with the Disclosure Project. And he's referring to the process of disclosure to get the information out, right? I came up with the concept of capital D disclosure, meaning, well, what's that? It's not the process, it's the event. It is the moment that we get the confirmation from the United States president. And so first we were talking on the Art Bell show, the politics of UFOs, then it was the politics of disclosure, capital D, right?
Yeah.
And then truth embargo. And so that was happening in the 90s as well. Art will, I hope, historically get the credit he deserves for playing the role that he played and helping to bring this embargo to an end. Now, he was an entertainer. He was doing it to service the show. But I think deep down, Art knew that that truth embargo was wrong and that what he was doing there and the people he was bringing on were helping to end that policy. And I hope that, well, he gets the credit for that.
Yeah, I think it's deserved. I mean, like you say, he was an entertainer, but he was still an important figure within the field, speaking to the right people and bringing the message forward, in my opinion.
Yes.
So, yeah, can you just take us forward a little bit to when Dr. Greer obviously did that important work in 2001 with the Disclosure Project conference and what you felt and what your involvement was? And did you see that as something like a big step forward in the whole subject?
Oh, yes. The milestone event. Greer's work started in the late 1980s. I was never a part of his organization.
Sure.
I was simply an activist working in my own thread, right?
Yeah.
But I was certainly aware of him. We had some communication. But I knew that he'd started in the late 1980s. And I knew that he was doing contact work because he's a contactee. So that was pretty interesting. So I was paying attention to that. But he was serious. He had resources. He had very substantial resources. So he was able to create organizations and do things that I certainly couldn't do. So he was the major player, in my view, in terms of what I'll call the disclosure small d process.
Yeah.
And that continued to develop all through the 1990s. Eventually, he got on Art Bell, and I think I was the one that brought him on. I think his first appearance was a program I produced for Art, but I'm not certain, where I told Art, look, let's bring on so-and-so and so-and-so, and we'll have a three-way or whatever. And Art said, sure, right, fine. You want to do that? We'll do that. The culmination, well, not the culmination, but the most significant thing he did clearly came in 2001. So he'd already been involved in the field for about 12 years, and he had the resources. And so he went out and started filming witnesses. He got into the witness issue, which was very significant. But that required resources. If you're going to be going around the country and you're going to be setting up and interviewing not 1, 2, 10, 20, but maybe 80, 90, 100 or more witnesses, that is a lot of money. So he spent many tens of thousands of dollars getting these interviews together. And then he was focusing on not just anybody, particularly people associated with the military or military intense defense complex, whatever, corporate, otherwise. And then he first of all, he has the bulk footage. Then he condensed that bulk footage down into a greatest hit. and then spent substantial amount of money to hold a significant press conference at the National Press Club. This was May the 9th, 2001. Now, I was in Washington, so I was aware of it. I participated a little bit. I helped a little bit, but I was not formally part of the project, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
I helped a little bit. That's as far as my involvement went. And I was there in the press club that day. And I knew it was important. I knew that this had never been done before. Nothing like this had ever been done before. It was the largest press conference ever held there at the time. It was in the main ballroom of the National Press Club, which is 2 blocks from the White House.
Wow.
And there were roughly 18 witnesses on the stage. Greer was obviously a moderator as well as a well-known actor whose name escapes me right now, John, I can't remember the second name, but he was a well-known actor. He was part of it. So the press got a substantial bit of evidence presented to them, and these witnesses and there's something very important about this that some people have forgotten, and it's very, very cleverly done. Greer made sure that all the witnesses said, when they finished their 5 minutes of a summary of their key testimony,
yeah,
that they said that they would testify to this before Congress under oath, because he was trying to get hearings. We've always been trying to get hearings. And in addition to that, I mean, he had been working to try to get hearings prior to 2001. He'd been up on the Hill, meeting here, meeting there. He held an event at a hotel. I can't remember the name of the hotel, but it was in Washington a couple of years prior to that. And he wasn't getting the hearings. But this event was another step in that direction. So in addition to holding the event that day, they also went up on the Hill. Some of these witnesses who were in town, and they met with some of the members of Congress. So this was a significant event. And on a personal note, let me see, how did it work? One of the people that I was working with, Keith Morgan, he was a tech. He was a longtime tech person working with Nightline and Ted Koppel. He knew Ted Koppel well. And when the tapes were given out, it was like a 4-hour DVD tape of a compilation of witness testimony to support the event. He grabbed one and he ran out, left the press club and literally ran up to the ABC News, which is not that far away. High Street, I think. And so he goes up there, he goes up to Ted's office, walks in and hands him the tape and says, "You got to see this." Well, that was cool.
Yeah.
And then later that night, when we were over at the hotel, he gets a call and he tells me, he says, "I just got a call from ABC. They said they would like the names of 4 witnesses to focus on, to interview." Well, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And so I then conveyed that message to Greer, and then he came back with a note, which I then handed to Keith, with the names of, I think, at least 4 witnesses, meaning these are the ones you don't talk to. And I think he added Edgar Mitchell, who wasn't present that day, but he added him to that list. Okay. And Keith went off with that. And so we were under the assumption that some of these people would be interviewed very soon by ABC News. And so as of the evening of May 9th, 2001, everyone involved were in high spirits. We thought this was a major breakthrough. We saw significant media developments coming from this. There was a substantial amount of coverage, I assure you. There was a huge number of press there, a lot of foreign press as well.
Absolutely.
And all was good. But history, unfortunately, has a lot of moving parts. In fact, history is the bane of the activist existence. Whatever you're involved in, however big the movement, however important the issue, you are at the mercy of history. And whatever plans you have to operate on the assumption that at any moment those plans could be completely thrown up in the air. And what happened in this case, a tragedy on so many levels, I cannot tell you.
Sure.
But one of the things that were affected tragically was this. When 9/11 took place just 4 months later, May 9th, June, July, August, September. Almost 4 months to the day later. Everything that Greer was trying to do, media coverage, hearings, anything like that, was completely obliterated. It was simply not going to happen. And who knew when this issue might get the kind of attention we wanted it to get? Who knew?
Yeah.
And so that was the way it was. And then we had to recover from that and figure out how to move forward. That and that event, 9/11, guarantee, I think at least added, God, 6, 7, 8 more years to the truth embargo. I'm sorry, let me see if I get that right. 2001. Oh yeah, at least 8, maybe even 10 years to the truth embargo. In other words, the truth embargo, the moment that event took place, the truth embargo had 10 years added to it, at least, maybe even 15, meaning that however things are going to go, the truth embargo was going to last 15 more years than you thought it was.
Wow.
And that's exactly what happened.
But was it not 2003, only a couple of years later, the Paradigm Research Group proposed initially the project, citizen hearing project, let's say, where you would conduct the week-long, hearings in Washington with members of House and Senate? Was that not just 2 years after that, or was that something that you did propose, but it didn't come to fruition for a long time?
I came up with the idea. This stemmed from, I was connected to the press club. I didn't join until later, but I was going up there all the time because I had connections there. I was going to meetings, so I knew the press club. Eventually, I joined, and I'm still a member. But I came up with the idea. Okay, he held a press conference in that main ballroom, 2 blocks from Washington, from the Capitol. I'm sorry, 2 blocks from the White House, 12 blocks from the that's a powerful setting, that ballroom. And I thought, what if instead of a press conference, what if we held a mock congressional hearing? What if we had former members of Congress come in and we set the room up like a hearing room on the Hill, Capitol Hill, and brought in witnesses to testify to them and made it look as much like a hearing as possible? I thought this was a wonderful idea. Now keep in mind, I didn't have any money at all. I had a couple of infusions of money over the years that were substantial. Mostly it was just enough to keep me alive, keep me going.
Yeah.
So it was a great idea, but it was, I thought, a $200,000 to $300,000 project. And so I put up a website, put it up on the net. My website work back then was awful, but whatever. And I talked it up a little bit. And I talked about it on I think Art Bell or what have you. But it didn't go anywhere. I just didn't have the chops to go out. Now, I'm not saying somebody else couldn't have done it. I wasn't able to get that thing going. And so it was an idea that I would occasionally revisit over the subsequent years. It finally happened because a substantial infusion of money. I was able to bring a substantial a bit of money to the table from a philanthropist, and that was in 2012. So that was like 9 years later. So the idea was there in 2003, but it had zero impact. It wasn't affecting the processes. There were other things I was doing that had more effect.
That's interesting. Yeah. But then we all know, or I think a lot of people I know about 2013 with the citizen hearing on disclosure, which is, the kind of thing that you were talking about 10 years earlier. But even in between that time, we're talking about the X conference, the Million Facts on Washington, Exopolitics World Network. You were obviously involved in so many things in that 10-year period before you got the citizen hearing on disclosure. Like, was that something that you found worked quite easily, or was it always every year a difficult thing to kind of get to that point and then do the next thing and the next thing?
Everything was difficult. And I made a fatal mistake in my life. I had no idea in my life that I would end up as an activist on the ET issue. I was just getting along to go along.
Yeah.
I was just not accomplishing very much. I was not living up to my potential. Let's just say that.
Did you feel like you were involved, though? Did you feel like you were pounding the same doors as other people in the subject?
Oh, in the subject. I'm saying prior to entering the field, prior to
Right.
being involved in '96, I had no idea that this was coming. And hang on. And so I made a fatal mistake. I failed to get rich. If I had lived up to my potential, I might have been a very successful entrepreneur. I might have become a professor in science or physics, something, and made decent money, invested in real estate, whatever the hell.
Yeah.
I didn't do that. And so as a result, when I entered the field, I had nothing. And by nothing, I mean nothing. All right.
Yeah,
Except I had a place to live. I had a free place to live because I have family in Washington, D.C.
Right.
And so I was operating as the lone, independent, poor rogue activist, which theoretically is got zero chance of doing anything except becoming very eccentric. So at the moment that I made that decision to get involved by going to Cambridge, one could make the case, well, that's pretty much the end of your life, okay? Because you're barely getting along as it is. This isn't going to go anywhere, and things are going to end badly for you. However, there was something else going on that I obviously came to realize, and that was this. At the time that I entered in '96 was the dawn of the age of the internet and ultimately social media. And what that meant was this. For better or for worse, the internet made it possible for a very poor single person, right, individual, to pursue activism from a basement or an attic and actually have impact.
Right.
You also had broadcast.com. You had internet radio developing along with broadcast radio. And so all of a sudden, you could interview from your basement or your attic office and reach an audience. You could put up a website and reach an audience. And then eventually you could get on Twitter. And so the age of the individual influencer starts to happen right as I come into the field. And while I was no a computer whiz, I sort of got that, and I rode that wave. And so I was able to have impact, even though I didn't have any money. But the impact was still limited. And so I got lucky in that regard. So everything that I've done in this field is up on my website. There is a lot of stuff there, and one can go and review it all.
Yeah.
And one could make a case it wasn't very much. One could also make a case that given that how little money I had, it was amazing. It doesn't really matter. The point is I did what I did to try to help out, and stuck with it. Meaning that when it comes to activism, being smart helps. Having money helps. All right. But if you want to see an activist movement of major importance to conclusion, the two most important things you need are patience and perseverance. History is filled with people with skill, with resources, opportunity, who failed because they had those things, but they didn't have the patience and they didn't have the perseverance, and they could not stick it out. I had that. And so 24 years later, I'm still here as we approach finally the resolution of the ET issue. And for that, and I'm able to stay healthy. So I have no regrets about not having the resources that would allow me to do a whole lot more, or not being able to to not being as driven as I could have been, not accomplishing more. I could have done a lot more, but I have my limitations like anybody else.
But you must understand that from an outside perspective, from people like myself, like we look at yourself and the work you've done over the years, and it's phenomenal for the subject. You know, it's easy. I suppose it's difficult looking from the inside out and things like that. You know,
I have colleagues that have done more, and I recognize them, and I also am a cheerleader for the extraterrestrial phenomena research activist world, because I understood early on that everyone was in this intellectual ghetto.
Yeah.
And when you're in the intellectual ghetto, you don't get awards, you don't get acknowledgement, you're treated badly, you can't get the press coverage you want. And so one of the things I set out to do is acknowledge, give these people the acknowledgement that they deserve. In whatever way that I might do that. One of the ways I did that was I held 6X conferences in the Washington, D.C. area.
Yeah.
Exopolitics conferences. They were the first to be done. Eventually there were others, but the first and only ones held in the Washington, D.C. area. And we had an awards banquet, obviously, and I gave out awards to people in the field. It was the most fun part of it. It's the thing I missed the most. The last one was 2010. I would have loved to have done 10 more, but unfortunately they all lost money and it was just impossible. I couldn't do it. So giving out awards and other things through the websites, I acknowledge, to try to normalize the issue. These people will eventually be acknowledged in history. Yeah. The Stanton Friedmans, the Richard Dolans, the Keoghs, the of course John Max, and so many others, are going to eventually be acknowledged in history. Some of them have not lived to see that acknowledgement, because this truth embargo is now 74 years on. Yeah. I actually have a page on my website, the In Memoriam section, where I have tried to acknowledge these people and put up a chronology of their passing. But there's still time for the people in the field the people in the field that are alive today are probably going to see disclosure very soon and also get that acknowledgement. So again, I've had a kind of a complex history here, but in terms of what we'll call just how can I put it, in terms of sheer output of work, Greer is way far ahead of me. Way far. I mean, my God, he's written 3 or 4 books. He's done 4 or 5 documentaries. Stanton Friedman did research for 40 years. Linda Moulton Howe has been doing research for 40 to 45 years, and so forth. And so there are people out there that the sheer output of their work is extraordinary, and they should have really big Wikipedia pages.
Do you feel that Greer has somehow kind of dropped off? I know he's getting a lot of backlash recently within the field of ufology for some of the things he's done recently. Have you seen any of that? Or is it, you know, he's been kind of, let's say, mudslinging people like Lou Elizondo and things like that. Is that something you've seen, and do you have an opinion on that?
I pay attention to everything that's going on.
Good.
First, Vinnie, it's not the field of ufology. It is the field of extraterrestrial research, right? Activism. UFO and ufology has to go. That's not what it is. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
So, Greer's work is extremely important. He has an enormous amount of output. He has done a lot of stuff. He has done a lot of things. He is essentially an activist. I don't know if he thinks of himself as an activist.
Right.
Let me tell you something about activism. All right. You don't pursue it without controversy. And the more you do, the more controversy you create.
Yeah.
And so the fact that he is controversial shouldn't surprise anybody. All right. And so my attitude about all these things is this. There are a lot of people pursuing disclosure of the extraterrestrial issue, and they're doing it in the way that they feel they need to do it.
Yeah.
And that's what matters to me. Getting into the details, or was that a good idea? Was this a good idea? Or you like this, like that, I could care less. I'm interested in, is the disclosure process being advanced? And there's no question that he has advanced the disclosure process. And I'll add this. It's a phrase that I've used. It's a story, not a story, but a phrase that, what is it? What we call it? I can't think of it. Anyway, it's something that I've said many times. If you want to take the activist path, there's some things you need to know. Here's one of those things. If you're an activist on a major issue, and there are small issues and big issues.
Yeah.
There are small issues. I'm not saying that's not activism. It is.
Sure.
But when you get up to the big level, and we know what major activism is, everybody knows what it is. And you're an activist and you are wrong. In other words, you are pushing against authority to get them to do something, and it's wrong. It's not the right thing to do, but you've decided that it is, and you're pushing. And there are plenty of activists out there doing that. Okay, they are trying to get things that we do not want.
Absolutely.
But they are committed, and you're wrong. You are going to be disliked. There's going to be people that don't like you at all. And if you're right, they really won't like you. Are you following me here?
I'm following you 100%. I get where you're coming from. Absolutely.
All right. So I always try to keep that in mind and not get too overwrought.
Yeah.
Because I think if someone, let me put it this way. Because I've operated, because I haven't put out that much output, and I haven't got that much exposure. I mean, I've gotten a decent amount, but not as much as I would have liked. Now that may change soon, but again, I'm operating from a low resource kind of independent rogue kind of thing.
Right.
And while I've used the internet substantially, I didn't get on the social media bandwagon as soon as I should have. And when I did, I wasn't prepared to go to the lengths that people were going to become, quote, social media influencers.
Right. Okay.
There's only a couple of ways to become a true social media influencer. One, you need to be extremely sharp at what you're doing. I mean, in other words, you need to be outstanding.
Yeah.
Okay. A genius, and have chops. In other words, you've got a resume that's substantial, and you're doing something. Or you need to be outrageous. Okay.
You're right. You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
And there are a couple of influencers out there that are both, they have serious chops, they're outstanding, and they're outrageous.
Yeah.
Their future is unlimited. I'm not going to name names. Their future is unlimited. But I couldn't be outrageous, and I didn't have the chops. So I've only been able to use social media to a certain point. Now that may change in the near future, but again, these are the parameters that have shaped my involvement, and I invite people to think about that as they consider other people in the field. People in this field have made various contributions, and as you look at them, understand that they're making these contributions from the world that they're in, from the resources they have. Don't judge people on how big their contribution was or how much they could have done. Don't judge them at all, but acknowledge them. And if they are trying to end this truth embargo, whatever they're doing is righteous, and respect that and acknowledge that. And that's the way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just jump forward quite a few years, obviously, to 2017, which is kind of the standout date that everybody knows about, December, with the New York Times, Politico, Washington Post story, ATIP and all that. Did you get any kind of excitement at that time? Was that something that you grabbed hold of and thought, here we go, we're now stepping up a gear?
Oh, God, yes. If you, in terms of the major the major positive, there's some negative milestones as you go back to 1947.
Sure.
But let's put those aside. Let's talk about the most positive milestones in the history of the disclosure movement, disclosure, capital D, the movement to get the confirmation of the ET presence from the U.S. government, who has known about the ET presence since absolutely no later than July 1947.
Sure.
And it's very possible that there are people within our government that knew about the presence of ETs before that, possibly early 1940s, possibly even sooner, but no later than 1947, which is good enough to make the point.
Yeah.
Right? The most positive milestones were, one, the end of the Cold War. Quote, the formal end of the Cold War as we knew it. The Cold War actually never ended, but what we're in now is Cold War II. So like World War I ended, and then we had World War II. Okay, Cold War I ended 1991. The end of that Cold War was absolutely a major milestone in terms of being able to advance the disclosure movement. Right. The second major milestone was the Rockefeller Initiative.
Yeah.
The development surrounding Rockefeller's effort to get the Clinton administration to release, quote, all the files. Well, you release the files, you end the truth embargo. That was the second major milestone. The third major milestone was Greer's May 9th press conference in Washington, D.C., May 9, 2001. All right. That was a major milestone. A number of things took place over the next few years. There were some significant press conferences. Leslie Kean and James Fox put on one. Robert Hastings and Bob Salas put on one. Again, these are all at the press conference, by the way. The press club, the National Press Club, has played a very important role in this.
Absolutely.
I hope if I do a book, I'll spend a lot of time in that book about that. So these were important, without question. The X conferences are important, and many other conferences are turning up. But I would say the next major milestone was the citizen hearing on disclosure 2013.
Absolutely.
And so there's that. Okay.
Yeah.
And I know what the next major milestone was supposed to be after that. So the citizen hearing on disclosure was 2013. The next major milestone was supposed to be the launch of the To the Stars Academy and the election of Hillary Clinton, which were going to happen very close together. All right, it was going to be a 1-2 thing. In other words, suddenly the To the Stars Academy was going to put up a website, hold a video, and say, we're here, here's what we're going to do. And everything that we saw, possibly a couple of different personnel, but was going to happen probably late November 2016, mid-December 2000, could have been even as early as 2017, January. Wow. But most likely before the inauguration of Secretary Hillary Clinton as President of the United States. And then she was going to get elected. And then all of that, plus the media engagement, was going to come together, setting the stage for her to encourage, right, the Congress, because she can't demand it, encourage the committees of the Congress to start holding the hearings that we've been trying to get all these years. That would have led to the end of the truth embargo, probably in the spring of 2017. That was supposed to be the next major milestone.
Yeah.
It didn't happen, as we know. Okay. What happened was that milestone was put off for 11 months. And so the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, it could have had another name. That's an interesting name. Some people don't like it. It doesn't really matter. The point is what it was and who was in it. The To the Stars Academy was launched on October 11th, 2017, as opposed to 2016.
Sure.
And the New York Times articles came in December of 2017, as opposed to 2016. That was the last, that was a major milestone, okay, without question. But it was the biggest one of all. And in fact, the day that I went to the website, which was before I saw the video, I think the website went up, the video went up shortly thereafter, or they went up simultaneously. I didn't see the video. But the moment I went to that website and I went through the personnel, read the mission statement, and went through the personnel, I instantly, I say knew. I guess you could say suspected, but the fact is I knew exactly what had just happened. All right. And I knew, well, this is the biggest event yet in the disclosure movement. And what is it that I knew? This is what I knew. that as of that moment, the disclosure movement, which I and so many other people have been involved in for so many years, and tried to do what we could, at that moment, the disclosure movement, the activist movement to get the US president to end the truth embargo, which we always knew would be preceded by congressional hearings, the real deal, not some one-day event like was held in 1968, was now being led by the military intelligence complex. Right? Think about that. Okay. You know, that's roughly the equivalent of Gandhi seeing something in the news back in just after the war, say, or even before the war, but after World War II, 1946, 1946. Gandhi waking up one day and reading the news and realizing that the effort, the activist movement to get the British to leave India was being led by the British Empire, right? That they were leaving it now, okay? The people that were ruling India, the British, were in fact now leading the movement to end their occupation. It was that huge. Now, when I say it was being led by the military, do I mean formally? Do I mean that the Secretary of Defense and the CIA director and the head of NSA and all the Joint Chiefs had gotten together and decided it's time to end the truth embargo, so let's do something about that? Oh no, that's not what I mean at all. What I mean is that individuals within the military intelligence complex privately came to the realization that many, many others, I assure you, had come to, not simply in the 21st century, but in the 20th century, going all the way back. There have always been people within the military services, within the intelligence services, who privately felt that this embargo should not continue, that the people should be told. But so what, right? They can privately think whatever they want.
Sure.
Acting is another matter. So but what we discovered then is these people had privately come to the conclusion that the truth embargo needed to end and that they were going to try to do something about it. How many private individuals were involved in this process is not known. In general, the origin story of the TTSA is not known. We've gotten the odd statement here and there.
Yeah.
You could allowing you to connect a few dots, but the origin story is not known. Eventually, I hope it will be completely revealed. History must know how this happened. But so was it 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50? How many people were chatting with each other over the lunch table, at the cafeteria at the Pentagon or the CIA, or over at the Air Force or the Navy, whatever? Pick an agency. It doesn't matter. How many people were talking to each other about, should we continue to keep this from the American people? Don't know. But we do know this. Ultimately, 10 agreed to be part of an organization that would be announced to the public with an agenda. The mission statement, which was interesting and bold. When I read it, I'm going, well, this is a mission statement. This is not the agenda.
Yeah.
Right? That's okay. It may be that they will pursue these things, particularly if they raise a great deal of money because they announced that they were a public benefit corporation. That's fine. Of course, yeah. They could have raised $100 million. I mean, things have gone differently. But that was, the mission statement wasn't the agenda. The agenda was something else. What was the agenda? The agenda was to end the truth embargo. All right. So these 10 people are the ones that agreed that they would publicly come forward as part of that organization. And that took a lot of guts, a lot of courage. Most people have no idea what it meant for these people to do this. And the critics and the debunkers and the skeptics and everybody else that are having their fun with this because they have a right to. I don't think I've spent enough time reflecting on that. But so there they were. And we knew who they were. And I'm going, okay, so now I'm saying, okay, this is a major event. So now I'm waiting for a couple of things. One, I'm waiting for the reaction from the military intelligence complex, because I knew that if the military intelligence complex wanted to shut this down, they probably almost certainly could.
Yeah.
But they would have to move fast. Okay, so I'm waiting for that reaction, right? And then secondly, I'm waiting for their first move. I mean, they put up a website, they put up a video, they announced that they're going to try to raise some money as a public benefit corporation. That's all fine. But that's not the move that I'm looking for. What is going to be their first move to pursue the agenda that I was quite sure that was on their plate? And how long would it take? Now, I was watching this from the UK, tragically. I had fled to the UK after the election.
Right.
I was in a witness protection program there,
Oh,
so nobody could find me. And so the point is that so when this breaks, I'm not around. And so I sat in the UK watching one of my colleagues after another being interviewed about what the hell was going on. I never got a call. And I really had been out of the game for a while, and I simply literally I was just not a player.
Are you able to? I mean, sorry to interrupt. That's blown my mind. You were in witness protection in the UK.
Yeah.
Can I ask?
No, no, that's a joke, Vinnie.
Okay. I know. I just.
Yeah, that's a joke. Most people that know me knew that was a joke, but I guess I need to clarify that, don't I?
That's okay, because I didn't know, and it kind of took a few seconds for me to go. Hang on a minute. I can't let that slide.
Here is another analogy that's better. Okay, that's more classic.
Okay.
I'm even going to put it in a UK context. Okay.
Okay.
You are at the most important soccer game in the history of the friggin' UK soccer world.
Okay.
And you are at the field, and the game is tied, right? Okay. It's in the last 6 minutes, and you have to go to the bathroom so bad you can't stand it. And ultimately, you rush up the aisle. You rush to the bathroom. You're in there. You're going as fast as you can. And when you come back, you discover that the winning goal has been made. And that's it. You weren't there. You missed it. That's the way it was. I was in the bathroom when the winning goal was played. And so I didn't, and that was in October. I didn't get back, and I finally got back to the U.S., but it wasn't until February 2018. And by then, I've been clawing my way back into the game since. The point is that they did not disappoint.
Yeah.
What did they do? All they did was get in touch with the New York Times. Exactly how they went down, not clear, but we were learning a little bit about it. Leslie Kean apparently was important here, might have been in the principal contact. I don't know, but one way or another, what they wanted to do gets presented to the New York Times. And the New York Times obviously thought, this is a pretty interesting story, and launched into it and vetted it and published the articles on December 16th. And what they published, what went up that day, not just in the print, but more importantly on the internet, because remember, the internet is now a major player in all of it.
Yeah.
That could be the second milestone. In other words, you could call the launch of the TTSA another major milestone, perhaps the most important, but then just 2 months later, another milestone. The New York Times, because the New York Times could have continued to say, look, it's impressive. And, we know there's an ET presence, but we just don't want to go there. I can't tell you what, whatever the hell. No. They published these articles, which included, right, amongst other things, the first pieces of gun camera footage on UAP intercepts ever released by the United States government or any government anywhere. There was a leak of the Nimitz thing that got out to some French documentary team or something years back, but it how that happened, we don't even know, but it wasn't official, and it just came and went, it was gone. This was official. And then that footage went up on the internet and has now been seen by how many hundreds of millions of people, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
That is a milestone. All right. So that is what took place December 16th. And when I saw that, I'm going, okay, we have crossed the Rubicon. We have brought the movement into the city. We are
Sure.
not going to go back. There's not going to be another 1969. You're not going to be able to close this down, shut this down, back this up. This is it. We are now going towards disclosure on a straight line. The only reason is how fast are we going to go?
Yeah.
And at that point, I realized that, well, the number one factor in how fast this would unfold would be the political circumstances in the United States, by and large, not elsewhere, but in the United States. What is the political circumstances here?
I mean, that's where we find ourselves in today, with everything that's happened in the last week or two, with the Authorization Act for fiscal year 2022 and the House and the select, I think it's the select proposals, where they're talking about putting in this permanent UFO or UAP office to replace this temporary UAP task force. Is that something you think is going to get voted in? Are you where's your confidence lie?
Well, you jumped ahead, though. You jumped ahead. But now you have to understand, a tremendous amount has happened since 2017. All right.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
What happened between the time they launched and what's going on right now? Believe me, a tremendous amount has happened.
I think in the public eye, though, I think we saw the TTSE thing happen with a few promises of the future ramping up, but then a little bit of a stagnant period for a couple of years.
But that was the point I'm trying to make, Vinny.
Right.
I knew from the point that those articles landed that how fast things were going to unfold depended on the political circumstances in the United States. Right? And what do I mean by that? It depended upon how the new administration was going to conduct itself.
Right.
All right.
That makes sense. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
In other words, how the executive branch of the United States conducts itself, I assure you, has a huge impact on what is going to happen in this country. Right? What's possible, what's not possible, the pace of things, and so forth. And this is true of nations around the world. And it's true going back in history. You can see examples of it all the time. There is something happening in a country, the quote executive branch, ruling branch, junta, whatever the hell, right? Whatever is controlling, governing, kind of controlling a country is in a certain situation, and that impacts that development.
Yeah,
it can impact it profoundly. There have been circumstances in the world and in history when a significant activist movement got underway, and the circumstances within the ruling authority of the country were such that all of the activists were taken out in the forest and buried in a mass grave, which slowed down the process quite a bit. Right? There's plenty of examples of this, and we are no different. What are the circumstances in the United States in terms of the ruling authority? And the circumstances were that we were going through a phase unlike anything we'd ever seen since the founding of the government. Now, admittedly, there were some pretty wild times in the early days of the American Constitutional Republic. Not so much the 1700s, though it was pretty tense back then. But in the 1800s, there was a couple of periods there with pretty wild. And it's hard to assess them from the future. There's plenty of the history of the American government is pretty well documented, as you know. But unless you were there, it's hard to really know how crazy it was. But we have a sense. My feeling is that what we've just gone through over the last 5 years, we've never seen anything like it in the history of the country. It is bizarre, extreme, disruptive, chaotic, disconcerting. Boy, I can think of other adjectives that just what. But the way I sum all that up is that what ensued, it had been building up offshore for some time, out in the Atlantic, all right, as a tropical storm.
Right.
And we'd been tracking it kind of for really about maybe 10 years, maybe a little bit longer. And it had been moving towards the coast. And it finally made landfall in November of 2016 as a Category 4 hurricane. And maybe Category 3. And so obviously it's a lot harder to do things in the middle of a Category 3 hurricane. Okay. It's like, it's like you're working on renovating your house and you're making some progress and you're on the back porch and a Category 3 hurricane comes in and you're thinking, I probably need to suspend working on the back porch because the whole goddamn back porch is starting to blow away. And so it hits and everybody has to make a decision. What are we now? And I love this analogy. It's the first time I've used this. What are you going to do? Whatever you're doing, your job, your whatever, what are you going to do? Right? It's a Category 3. Do you bunker down? You go in the basement? Do you leave the area? What the hell do you do? And the To the Stars Academy made the decision after assessing the situation that they would proceed into that hurricane. Maybe it's because the eye of the storm passed over Washington around October of 2000. I don't know. And so they launched into the hurricane in 2017. And what happened next is the hurricane went from a Category 3 to a Category 4. And that is what has affected the pace of things.
Right.
Right. And so what they were able to do over those next 3 years, 2018, 2019, 2020, going into November 2020, is to operate from the basement while the storm raged overhead. And what do I mean by the basement? Behind the scenes, right? So you could put together a series on the History Channel. That can all be filmed indoors. You're not really much affected by the politics. You put it all together, you get it up on the History Channel, and you show what you're doing. That's kind of cool, right? They did that. They started vetting witnesses, which you can kind of do privately, no problem. Sure. Nobody has to know. Talking with this former pilot and that former corpsman and whatever the hell, you're vetting witnesses.
Yeah.
They went up on the Hill and started privately briefing members of Congress and committee chairs. Privately, right? Underneath the overall storm. They were doing things behind the scenes while the storm raged. And the question is, would the storm pass? Well, theoretically, it looked like the storm was passing as we ended 2020.
Yeah. And
there had been some developments in 2020 that were non-trivial. Well, I'm sorry. Let me take that back. The storm looks like it's passing in 2020, in the end of 2020. And we entered 2021, and optimism was high. I was making strong statements. I kind of knew what was coming. And then the damn storm returned. It was like I was beginning to feel like Louisiana. In other words, you talk to somebody in Louisiana, New Orleans, you say, "Hey, I understand you've had this. If a hurricane comes in and does all this stuff, what is that?" And a Louisianan will say, "Oh, that's Tuesday. That's Tuesday. It might be Sunday. Doesn't matter. They get hit by a hurricane about every 3 weeks." And so, and there have been a couple of cases where a hurricane actually has made land, gone back offshore, come back and made land again. So essentially, things have not gone quite as we thought. Again, history is the bane of an activist. And so, as we enter, let me see if I get this right now. I get this right. There were developments going on as we entered 2020. that were significant, without question. And I anticipated a rapid pace. And then the worst pandemic since the Black Plague turned up. Okay. And I say, it might even be worse than the 1918, 1919, because of the larger population now and the globality of its spread and how long it's going to last. So it may end up surpassing 1918, 19, which is a formidable milestone.
Yeah.
It may not catch up with the Black Plague of the 11th century, but let's face it, if we had the same medical understandings and science that we had in the 11th century that we have now, I guarantee you this plague would have crushed the big one, right? The bubonic Black Plague. But fortunately, we have tossed all of the massive technology we have at this thing, right? I mean, everything we could possibly do, and we're sort of containing it. But if we had the same technology we had then, this pandemic would probably have killed 1 billion people.
Right.
But it's not going to. It's probably going to end up killing around 10 to 11 million. So, but still, so that showed up. And of course, as an activist, it's one thing when a plague or a pandemic shows up and you're a billionaire or 100 million, you just head on out to your island home, the one in the South Pacific, right? Spend some time on the yacht. Make sure everybody is back, whatever. But if you're a poor activist and something like that comes, it's like being a person in Louisiana who wakes up Wednesday morning and goes and finds that their house has been gone. It's gone and not there anymore, right? There's no house. It's like, we're going to have to build another one. And just like that Louisiana, you know what an activist does? They build a house in exactly the same place, right? They put it back up in exactly the same place so the next hurricane can take it down, because we don't have an option. And so the pandemic shows up, and then the political situation continues to develop. We have an semi-armed insurrection. Again, I'm going, come on, man, give me a break. Okay? I mean, come on. I mean, look, how hard does this have to be? All right? Does this have to be some biblical Jobian thing? I mean, why can't we just get it done? And then when I have a moment like that, I think back to other activist movements, okay, where things didn't go the way you wanted them to. And let me say that this isn't that bad. All right. Okay. There have been worse situations than this. And so consequently, I need to chill. And so what has happened this year, part of which goes back to 2020. And that's why I brought that up. The most significant developments in 2020 stemmed from the TTSA's work. And by that, I mean Louis Elizondo and Christopher Mellon,
right,
who eventually stepped out of the TTSA because that was necessary. It had nothing to do with disagreements, really. I don't believe it. It had to do with the fact that they needed to be independent. But the briefings on the Hill finally generated action, and the action came from Rubio, who was the chairman of the Intel committee. And so he makes this dramatic move to put language in the the Defense Appropriations Bill calling for a report. That's what launched my optimism to a whole nother level.
Of course.
And so as we head to November, that is already in play. Now, the bill doesn't get signed to December, and so the 180-day deadline doesn't start till then. So the deadline for that report eventually ends up being June 27th, 2021, right?
25th, I think.
25, yeah. So, June 25. And so, but the optimism that action took, confirming what I knew was going on, which is they're going to get hearings. They're trying to get the hearings, right?
Yeah.
So then I'm thinking, okay, bring it to hearings. But I knew that it was going to be hard to get those hearings until this hurricane left town. And so finally it did. As of November, theoretically, it was scheduled to leave. And so now the optimism really ascends. And I'm making some very strong statements in December of 2020. And then I went out to California to try to raise some money. And while I'm out there, the pandemic explodes. And I realized, well, this is not going to perhaps go the way we hoped. And so I came back to Washington and I set up, and I was able to get I was able to get an office in the press building where the press club is. It's just a few floors above where we in Washington, where I have an office. I'm in Hollywood, California right now. And while I was there, the insurrection took place, right? And so I'm 2 blocks from the Capitol. I'm 2.5 blocks from the Ellipse, okay? And I'm sitting up in the Capitol and I'm watching the stuff going on in the Ellipse on my 65-inch television. The next thing I know, people are moving on towards the Capitol, right? And I'm saying, well, that's interesting. What the hell's going to happen there? And the next thing I know, they're breaking in, and I'm going, okay, that's not good. It's not going to help. All right, it's not going to help. And thus 2021 began. All right, and so what has transpired since January 6th is this. The media has shifted its massive efforts of coverage and journalism to the remnants of that category 4 hurricane and the pandemic. And that's what it is, 24/7. All right. Yeah. The hearings process is on hold, period. There's no way that Marco Rubio, or rather Mark Warner and that committee chair is actually going to call hearings. Now they've mentioned it, so we know it's still in play, but you're not calling military witnesses to the Hill for multi-day hearings on the UAP subject on national security basis while the pandemic is surging and resurging and the political chaos is still reigning, right? That has to be on hold. And I accept that. Okay. But I assure you, does that mean we're going backwards? No, we're not going backwards. We're still headed to the finish line. We're just walking now. All right. Yeah. We can't run. And so what are the examples of that? Well, one of the examples is this. To show that they're still on board. And the DOD is on board, I can assure you. The Department of Defense has done everything but simply throw the towel in the parking lot and say, look, we give up, okay? We're not going to get in your way. We're going to help this. We're going to do what we do, but we're not going to violate our relationship to the executive branch. But yeah, no, we accept the fact the truth embargo is coming. And the Navy has done the same thing, and you're going to see more of that. But we're having to walk it. But the inclusion in the next appropriations defense bill, calling for the permanent task force to be made, and calling for regular reports is their way of saying we're still on board. Okay, now let me tell your audience something very important right now. Okay. You may be experiencing some serious cognizant dissonance. Right? And here's why. And I love saying this. And this is going to be my mantra. I'm going to pound this out there. If I ever get on CNN, boys, the first thing that's going to come out of my mouth. CNN and again, rather, been on before. The government has known about the ET presence since 1947, okay? The government has been embargoing that confirmation from us for 74 years. It has been doing research on ET technology. There's who knows how many unacknowledged special access programs dealing with the ET issue are existing and operating for how much money, for how, who knows? It's a big number. So when the government says, we want to set up a permanent task force to look into this issue, anybody that knows what I just told you is going, what? What? Wait a minute. We had Project Blue Book from 52 to 69. It was 17 years. They studied reports all that time. They came up with, they studied thousands of reports. They came up with 701 they could never explain. Then they shut the whole thing down. There's other documents and evidence showing they've been studying this forever. Another task force? What is the point of this? What are you trying to convey to us, right? So That's cognitive dissonance at a high level. Now, one way people are going to deal with that is they're going to say, oh, wow, finally, the government is finally realized, wow, there's this unknown technology flying around, and we don't know what it is. And we need to really investigate that seriously and not make fun of it anymore. And if we do investigate it, maybe for 5 or 10 more years, the government may get enough evidence put in front of it to go, wow, we think it's extraterrestrial. Okay. There are some people out there that are kind of new to the game that are actually thinking like that. And they're going, yeah, I have to deal with that. Okay. This is my burden. All right. But there's another point of view. Okay. Actually, there's 3 points of view. The second point of view is, we know damn well you've been doing this all this time. I'm mad as hell. God damn it. I am pissed. I'm going to raise hell, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to say that, and I'm going to throw a bunch of shade at you, and goddamn, all that. I don't blame that person for being that way. And you're seeing some of that on the net. Okay. However, there is a third point of view that I would like to recommend. This is far less destructive, far less anxiety producing. You can sit, watch all this happen. You can maybe have a libation, some snacks, do breathing exercises, and just kind of relax and chill and watch it unfold. This is the one I recommend. All right. What is in fact going on here? What is going on is this. Some sausage is being made. All right. And nobody really wants to know how the sausage is made. This happens all the time in government. Perfect example is nuclear proliferation and so forth. SALT, strategic arms limitation talks. Everybody knows that they had those. It went on for a long time, and they finally passed a treaty that actually seemed to help a little bit, though we're still in deep doo-doo on this. They don't really want to know how those things took place. They want to know how we arrived at a SALT treaty. I can assure you it was chaos. It was brutal. There was this and that and compromise and problems and all kinds of crap that was going on, and compromises were being made, and the process worked forward until they could have the treaty. They could have just said, hey, let's have a treaty. And Gorbachev would have, fine, fine, whatever. I think maybe that was under, and okay, let's quick get it together, boom, bam, and then write it up and sign. No. They could have dumped all kinds of information out to the public about the real nature and risk of nuclear arms race and the threat of nuclear war and all, but they didn't do that, right? Because if they did, it would have undermined the process they feel they had to go through. Okay, so here is how to look at this. There is a process underway. The process is to get congressional hearings on the UAP issue, so that, and I mean substantial, lengthy, multi-committee for not 1, 2, 10, 15, but 20, 30, 40, 50 military witnesses like Fravor and Day and so many others, and some we don't even know about. And I'm sure they'll bring up some Joint Chiefs and they'll bring up some DOD people or whatever. I'm talking the real deal here, that will be seen by hundreds of millions of people. They will be live. They will be the most watched hearings in the history of any government, any time. And those hearings will provide the public platform for the president to come forward, who, by the way, is deliberately staying out of this completely. It means nothing to say, because that's exactly what he has to do. For the president to come forward and say, I've been watching the testimony like you have, and we have concluded that this confirms there is an ET presence, there is an extraterrestrial technology here, and we're going to tell you more about that, and we're going to get down to this, we're going to get into this in a real way. That's what has to happen. The hearings must come first. Okay. And Mellon knows that, and Elizondo knows that, and everybody on the TTSA knows that. So first you got to get the hearings.
Right.
So the process underway is to get the hearings. How do you do that? Do you go up on the Hill and say to the committee chairs, like it was Rubio, now Warner, the chairs of the Armed Services Committee, here Christopher Mellon, got some witnesses, got some contactees with me. Hey, look, here's the deal. They're contacting people. They're taking them up into their ships. They're doing genetic research. I'm telling you, they're here. This is huge. All right. So I think we need to hold hearings with the contactees, and also I think we need to start talking about an embassy or something and how we're going to welcome the ETs in a formal way, a party, something. What kind of refreshments we're going to have? I think the committee chairs are going to, yeah, let's have some hearings on it. I don't think so. How do you get committee chairs to put their legacies and careers at risk, though the risk is not nearly what you think it is now? And my citizen hearing on disclosure was specifically to show the risk won't be that bad, but whatever. To hold those hearings, first of all, you cannot talk about ETs are already here. You don't talk about a whole range of the phenomena. You focus on two things. There is a national security basis for addressing this issue. There are legitimate national security concerns, and we have military witnesses can speak to those concerns or to speak to the evidence related to those concerns, and you need to bring them up on the Hill to talk about that.
Yeah.
And they're going fine. And that has been the process. That is what's determined what Elizondo can say or not say, what Mellon can say or not say, what they can do or not do, what Rubio can do, what the Defense Department can do. All right?
Yeah.
And so you could ask these gentlemen or ask the Department of Defense, are ETs here? You're not going to get an answer. And if somehow you get them in a position, and this has happened very rarely, but you get them in a position where they don't have the ability to maneuver, they're just going to lie to you. And that's happened on a few occasions. But are questions being asked of the White House press secretary, of the press secretary for the Pentagon? Yeah. And we have those responses. Are other questions? Yeah. But everything is within the process. We're not going to get above that process. And so consequently, that process is what affected what the Republic report that we got on June 25, which wasn't much. Couldn't be much.
Yeah.
And certainly, but what was important was not the public report, which the Department of Defense had no desire to put out, but Rubio politically saw the wisdom of that. He realized, ask for a public report, you don't care what's in it. The very fact of asking for it guarantees enormous political media coverage of the damn thing, because give the media a deadline on something like that, and they're going to cover it to death, right? And it's going to get him, and who else is going to get a lot of coverage? Marco Rubio is going to get a lot of coverage. What mattered was the classified report that was delivered 9 days before the public report.
Yeah.
And that was 400 pages. The reason we know that is Luis Elizondo saw it and told his attorney, Danny Sheehan, it's 400 pages plus PowerPoint. That's the one that matters, but that is still classified. Why didn't they just come out and tell us what was in it? Because you see, that would undermine the process, right? The process is to get hearings, not to launch a massive torrent of speculation about ETs right now in the media or anywhere else. So don't be concerned that we're going to spend the next 10 years or 5 years waiting for the next 90-day report from the permanent ATP,
UAPTF.
UAPTF task force. Don't be concerned that there's going to be another Project Blue Book that goes on for 17 years, where they come back and say, we've reviewed 43,000 sightings, and there's 2,000 that we can't identify, but we're shutting it down because the University of California at Santa Clara just issued a report that there's really no. Don't be concerned about that. I'm going to be quite clear here that as soon as things settle down, which right now is almost directly dependent upon the vaccine schedule. In other words, how many people are vaccinated and how many people are immune from previous infection, and how bad is the next variant? As soon as that gets settled, in a sense, meaning, okay, the current variant is not awful. We got it under control. The total, herd immunity level is up to 85%. Something like that, which is reachable. That is the number one determinant as to when these hearings can be held, because they can't be on Zoom or StreamYard, or there are some things happening on the Hill, but you're not going to hold hearings on the UAP task force involving scores of military witnesses that have to be on the Hill.
Yeah.
And you're not going to do this without an audience in that room in the middle of a surging new variant pandemic. It simply can't happen. Not to mention the fact that you've still got to focus on the damn pandemic, right? Because while you're trying to hold this massive event, the most important hearings ever held, people are dying by the thousands. And so that's not going to happen. Okay. Yeah. And there are some things you can do to let people know, hey, we're still on board here. It's okay. All right. You'll see a lot of that. You'll see some of that. But we can't have the hearings. All right. And it's also complicated by the fact that there's some political things going on right now which are still bizarrely disruptive. Okay. I mean, bizarrely disruptive. And that needs to settle down a little bit. And also, the circumstances are in Washington, D.C. right now that the current administration, in addition to dealing with whatever bizarre political drama is happening, are trying to address two massive pieces of legislation, not just some new legislation. We're talking massive pieces of legislation. Right. Whether one agrees or disagrees with whatever that legislation, it doesn't make them any less massive. And so those pieces of legislation obviously are dominating political coverage. What little political coverage is available once you've covered the hurricanes, the pandemic, and the political drama. All right. And so I'm at this point, I'd like to say hearings at the end of the year.
Okay, that'd be good. Okay. That'd be something. Yeah.
Now, why am I trying to target there? And there was a time when I was saying it could have been this spring, but that was before the pandemic and before the insurrection. Okay. And the point is that there's a chance that things will have settled down enough by, say, December or even late November. And that's good. It's also the case that, and this is the nature of American politics, not British politics. Be thankful that you don't have our system, I'll tell you. Because in order to have a parliamentary election, basically you call it, you run for about, I don't know, a couple of weeks, 5 weeks, you spend a few million, and somebody is, you have a new parliament, and maybe a new prime minister. Over here, we start our elections 1, 2, 3 years in advance, and we spend billions of dollars. Okay. And we end up getting a government no better than the one we had before.
Yeah.
Right. All of that money could be spent on really doing some wonderful things here. You don't do that. Be thankful. Anyway, so the point is that, and the next political campaigns for the 22 elections will start right after Christmas, okay, in January, right away. All right. Even though the primaries, which would also start too early, don't come later in the year. Now, if I'm the DOD, and if I'm Mark Warner, or if I'm the committee chairs of any of the committees that have been briefed by Mellon, and I know how big these hearings are going to be, if I know how profound they're going to be, I do not want to be holding these hearings in the middle of the political season. I don't want to be holding these hearings while at the same time the members of the committee are sitting there thinking about, can they get reelected this year or not, right? Or how is this going to affect my reelection prospects? Because right now we have a very substantial number of people in our Congress who would put anything and everything you can conceive of behind their need to get reelected, period. Coronal mass ejections, extermination level events, right? The pandemic takes off with the Zeta variant, killing 400,000 people a day. Number one on their mind will be, can I get elected in November of 2022? That is unfortunate. We need less of such people in our Congress, I can assure you. Somehow we've got to get rid of these people and replace them with people that actually want to serve and put the welfare of the nation ahead of their own personal ambitions. We're working on that, okay?
Yeah.
But so you don't want those hearings then. You want to get those hearings out of the way. You want to get disclosure out of the way, end of this year, early January, so that all of the campaigns that are going to take place, and we have a lot of them here, We have 435 in the Congress, plus another 5 in the territories. And then we've got 33 Senate campaigns. We got a whole bunch of governor campaigns. God knows how many state representative. We have got thousands of them. Everybody running for whatever office they're running for in 2022 need to be on the same page.
Yeah.
By that, I mean they all need to be on in the post-disclosure world together. Meaning, okay, everybody agrees. Okay, hello, audience. I'm here today to talk about what I want to do and why you should elect me to the Senate or the House. But we can all agree that there's an extraterrestrial presence, can't we? And I can talk about that. I can talk about my thoughts about that. I can talk about policy regarding that. And nobody in the audience today is going to think I'm crazy, that I'm batshit crazy. No, nobody, because we've all agreed. All of the heads of state of nations have confirmed his ET presence. Xi Jinping, Putin, Boris, all of them. They've all confirmed it. They've even shown us evidence. It's a done deal. It's in the past. Look, there are a few people that still don't believe it. There's people out there that still think the earth is flat. It's okay. It's all right. But virtually everybody in the audience today, we're on the same page, are we not?
Yeah, we've got to be. We've got to be. I mean, I'm just going to pull this up because it's a question that jumps out at me. That apparently you've commented in the past about connections with Japan regarding disclosure back in the day. Do you have an opinion about where they are right now?
I don't have an opinion where they are. Japan, but I do know this: Japan hasn't done anything of late that's particularly notable. There is a UFO interest there, always has been. UAP interest, of course. Yep. There was a couple of interesting moments in the past 15 years. One of us in which one of the newly elected prime ministers of Japan's wife talked about being a contactee. There was a point when a top minister said something to the effect that ETs were kind of here, and that generated a lot of press. But Japan is not pushing disclosure. It's not doing anything profound there, and that is true of most of the nations of the world. In fact, if you think about it, and this is interesting, right? And you look at the developments that have happened since 2017.
Yeah.
I think it's quite remarkable how little other nations have said. You would think that, boy, a lot of these other would want to be on the record here. You know, what's going on? I mean, Rubio calls for the reports, and former CIA directors are coming for people that were dismissing this issue out of hand not that many years ago, are suddenly coming forward and saying, you know, I don't think we understand this technology that they're showing there. You know, I don't know if we have that. I'm talking Brennan, I'm talking Woolsey, and others. You would think that a lot of other governments, we want to jump in here and say, no, they're not. There's coverage in these other countries.
Yeah, of course.
Why aren't they jumping in with their own views? Why isn't Boris saying anything? Why are some of the members of parliament jumping in? Hey, I heard about Marco Rubio. I'll tell you why. Okay? Let me tell you something. Every developed nation, and most undeveloped nations, but certainly I say developed, the technological nation, the ones that have the technology, the defense departments, the Air Force and so forth, there's a lot of these. Every one of them has known about the ET presence for decades, if not all the way back to the 40s. Every single one of them. I can't repeat this enough for those that are having cognitive dissonance and could have an embolism blow out their brain at any moment. All right. Every single one of them knows. And that means that I don't care what country we're talking about. If you're the prime minister or even the dictator of that country, I assure you, you may not know about the programs going on in the U.S., but somebody in your government has taken you aside and said, Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Dictator, great leader, look, you know, the ET presence is real. You know, we don't know much. Every single one of them knows. Okay. So, therefore, it is not surprising that as they have watched these things unfold, as they have seen that the Pentagon has basically said, okay, we give up. You know, they're even meeting with Danny Sheehan and Luis Elizondo at the IG office. I mean, you know, and having substantial, I mean, they see where this is going. Now, the pandemic has screwed that up, and let's be fair. Other nations are having a worse time than we are in many cases. Okay, and so, you know, they got people dying in droves. and it's getting worse. And so yeah, that's a pretty big deal for them. But they know, and so they know where this is going, and they're staying out of the way. All right. Let's don't say or do anything that could interrupt the process of making this sausage here. Right? Because I'm the head of this country. Anything I say could cause a kerfuffle. I don't know. I don't want to screw the pooch here. All right. And so they're staying out of it, I believe, deliberately. And if asked, they will defer. They will demur, meaning, look, whatever. Okay. And that's fine with me. All right. I'm aware of some other things going on, but overall, it's under the heading of, yeah, but we don't want to talk about it. That is another sign of how close we are, right? In other words, they understand, look, the U.S. needs to be the one to end this embargo. Putin could do it anytime he wants to. We understand. We kind of prefer the U.S. Same thing with Xi Jinping. We prefer the U.S. The U.S. is the one that needs to end this. They're kind of getting there. They're almost there. For God's sakes, just cool it and let it happen. All right? In other words, we're not going to be calling British witnesses or Russian witnesses. All we need is our own military witnesses.
Yeah.
Mostly retired, maybe a few active. All right. That's all we need. And the president can make the announcement. And then Putin can follow and Xi Jinping can follow. And I think politically, I think they both feel that's probably the better way to go, but they could change their mind at any moment. I know the UK will be thrilled. Okay. We can stop dealing with this. The UK is laughed at crap over this, right? The UK is so knee deep in the truth embargo, it's not even funny.
We're so far behind. We just hang on the coattails of the US.
You may be far behind in terms of your public actions.
Oh yeah,
no. MI6 is up to its ass in the ET issue, right? Yeah. And the nuclear issue and everything else. Canada, poor Canada, they're up there. They've been used by us forever. I assure you, they would love to see this thing open. And then. And by the way, there's something else I didn't mention. In terms of making the sausage, there is a way to do it that is the appropriate way. It's the least disruptive way. It is the responsible way. But it has one other benefit. Doing it this way makes winners, not losers, out of most of the principles. Okay? All right? If the president suddenly wakes up one day and says, I've had enough of this, and he goes out and says, yeah, there's ETs here. I've known. I should have told you sooner. It's going to take a raft of crap. I mean, it's going to be like, oh, you telling us today, right? You telling us today? Is that it? Is that what you're telling us? Okay. And you didn't tell us before? And then, of course, the Defense Department is going to go nuts, right? Blah, 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 you've just put us in an and on. And everybody is losing. All right. It's awful. It's chaos. It's not going to happen. Now, let's look at the hearing process and what's going on right now. The Pentagon's on board. They put out reports. They brief the Congress. They're making positive statements. They set up a UAP task force over at the ONI. They're just being so helpful. And the Navy is being helpful. Okay. They set up a new reporting process for the pilots. They encourage them to report and so forth and so forth. That's good. Congress is looking pretty good. You've got people in Congress calling for hearings. They're getting the briefing. And of course, if they have hearings, at least 70 members, that's about how many people are on the two House Intel and House and Senate, the House and Senate and House and the House and Senate Intel and Armed Services committees. Yep. They're all going to be on camera. Hundreds of millions of people watching as they ask intelligent questions. You don't have to be political here. No show, no dog and pony show. Intelligent questions of the witnesses. Commander Fravor, when did you first notice the tic-tac? They're looking great. They're getting lots of great press, lots of coverage. Fantastic. The committee chairs, well, of course, they get tremendous amounts of exposure and interviews and everything. Looking fine. Okay. And so the Congress is winning. The president wins. The president basically is now able to come forward at some point while these hearings, have gone on long far enough and say, wow. And this particular president who has stayed out of this issue, but I assure you knows about this issue, and I can get into that. But the point is that I assure you Biden knows about this issue. He has stayed out of it virtually his whole career. And so he can come forward and say, I've been watching this testimony with like you for days now. Extraordinary. And I've discussed it with my top people at the Pentagon and with congressional leaders. And we have come to the conclusion that this testimony does confirm that some of these sightings, some of this, what we're seeing, is in fact non-human technology, which means extraterrestrial. I might even say extraterrestrial technology. And people will go, "Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you." I watched too. I totally agree. And you have had the courage to look at it and say, that's the truth, and come forward and tell us. You are a hero of mine. The president wins, the Congress wins, the witnesses win, of course. And by the way, the witnesses will be from different services. Eventually, the Air Force will get on board. The Air Force is completely staying out of this. They will not touch this with the 10-foot pole. And people are saying, where's the Air Force? The reason is quite simple. Of all of the agencies and services in the government on this issue going back to 1947, the Air Force has the absolute worst record. It is awful. It is abysmal. It is an historical snafu. And so they are the entity, the agency, the service that is going to have the worst public relation problems afterwards. They're the ones who are going to have the toughest questions. It's going to be brutal. And so they're just kind of going, look, the less we say, the better, right? Everybody knows how awful our record is. And so if we say anything, they're going to say, get out of here, right? So they're just staying quiet. Right, they figure the less we say, the better. It's all, and then it'll go down when it goes down. That's if the Air Force ever comes forward and tries to get on the disclosure train, that is a sign that we're really close. Okay, but the point I'm making is that the hearings process is making winners out of lots and lots of agencies and people.
Yeah.
And some of my colleagues, some of my supporters would say, "God damn it, Stephen, you're being too nice, right? We want to punish them. We want them to suffer, right? We want to put them in a corner and rain down awful questions on." No. Look, the idea is to get disclosure and move forward here, right? Right. That's what's important to the world. Absolutely. Not how miserable you make, the U.S. government, these people. History will judge them. History will be kind. History will be not so kind. Let history do that job. All right. Let's help the process. Let's make friends because, and we probably should wrap this up here. Look, disclosure is nothing more than the confirmation of the ET presence.
Yeah.
That's all it is. We've known, millions of people know they're here. 40% of the public believe the phenomenon is extraterrestrial. That's the latest poll. It's been that way for 25, 30 years. Gallup just did a poll a couple of weeks ago. 40%, yeah, it's extraterrestrial. So that's how big it's the most profound event in human history. But that's all that it is.
Yeah. What
comes next is the post-disclosure world. That's where all 7 billion of us have to rethink what the world is like and what it means and what we're going to do and what the government should do. And then we're going to get all this information, including information about tech and what we're going to do about that.
Yeah.
That's a century's worth of work. The changes that we will see then will be far greater than the simple change of the government telling the world something it's already known for most of the world's known for 70 years.
Absolutely.
And in the post-disclosure world is when the action happens, the legislation takes place, the meetings take place, the worldview changes take place. That's when things get real. And so we need all the friends in the post-disclosure world we can get. And so this idea, let's conduct the disclosure process and get disclosure by pissing off as many people as possible, ruining as many careers and legacies as possible, right? Creating as many enemies as possible. This is not the way to go. No. This is not what you want to do. You want these people to be your friends, and they're going to come, and they may come up to you afterwards, some former, I don't know, military guy or general or some former CIA person or CIA director, and say, I really appreciate the work you did on this, or or just introduced. You're just introduced to them, and you want to just hit them right away. You son of a bitch! You were debunking this issue for 15 years. You lied about it over and over again. You were part of the truth embargo. You were heap dipping it. I hate your guts. No, you want to say, Mr. Secretary, it is a pleasure to meet you. I noticed your statements about the recent developments. Appreciate them greatly. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. You see what I'm getting at, Vinny?
I absolutely do. And I think that's right. I mean, history will, catch up with the people that it needs to catch up with when it comes to the misdemeanors and negative things which
Don't put it quite that way. Not catch up. History will account. It will explain.
Okay, yeah.
All right, it will describe. Historians are not in the. Hey, by the time history gets involved, the statute of limitations is always over. History is about explaining and putting in context, and then other people will read that and they will have a judgment, and that's what establishes a person's long-term legacy.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Sometimes that historical legacy is false because they just don't get it right. Sometimes it's correct, but it is what it is. I'm not a historian. I'm an activist. All right. Yeah. Let's use the disclosure process as it unfolds as a great opportunity to make friends in the media, make friends in our governments, make friends with our military, because guess what? The day after disclosure, there's been a movie called that.
Yep.
I had a book called that I actually had an advance on with a major New York publisher, but I was mentally so screwed up that I couldn't do the book and I had to give the advance back. The day after disclosure, the situation the day before disclosure will not have changed. And what's that situation? We are closer today to nuclear war than we've ever been since 1945. Now, that's a statement that doesn't sound like much, but I can't overemphasize how important it is.
Right.
We are in Cold War II. The world is more unstable than it's ever been. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, which has been tracking nuclear war risks since 1947, not that long ago, moved the clock, the doomsday clock, to 100 seconds to midnight, 1:40. It's the closest it's ever been. Closer than the Cuban Missile Crisis, closer than during the actual Cold War I. And there are reasons for that. I don't think I want to go into them right now because it's an hour and we're already over time. The point is that we could have a nuclear war tomorrow.
Right.
And we have been living on that edge for far too long. We've been lucky.
Yeah.
Our luck could end tomorrow. And I assure you, if we have that nuclear war, whatever your political issues are, whatever your vaccination issues are, whatever your hopes and dreams are, they're done. They're over. They're done. Okay. All right. If you're lucky, you'll die in the initial blast. If you're unlucky, you'll survive the initial blast and you will die later. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really all you can hope for. And we are one screw up away from that. And that will be true the day after disclosure as it is right now. Now, again, I'm going to be talking about this more as we go forward. And people are going to get really irritated. They're going to call me a fearmonger, or you're out of your zone, or whatever the hell. But no. Because, and this is going to be, I'm going to be giving this lecture at the Conscious Light Expo,
yeah,
which is coming up next week. I think I'm lecturing on doing a panel on Sunday. This is the LAX Hotel.
Yep, right.
So people can go on, just Google Conscious Light Expo, and you can find out how to participate in that. It's actually going to be live at the LA Expo, LAX Hotel, and in a Hilton Hotel in London, and it's going to be online. So it's going to be both. This will be the first live audience I've been in front of in 22 months. I'm going to be talking about this, but here's just a little hint. The two most important things that have been going on since 1945 are the extraterrestrial presence and the nuclear arms race.
Yeah.
And it turns out that they are interconnected. And that interconnection needs to be much more developed in terms of the public mind. We need to get into that far deeper because it may be the most important aspect of it all. And so again, the point I'm making is this. The day after disclosure, the risk of nuclear war is just as great. But the day after disclosure may be the beginning of the human race finally moving to an understanding followed by action that cannot continue.
Sure.
That we need to do with the nuclear arms issue once and for all, or we're going to expire. Our civilization is going to be destroyed. It'll be set back 500 years, all hell will reign loose. It will be awful. It will post-traumatic stress syndrome. You can't imagine how bad that will be. So we have to make a decision, and we can't do it now. In the pre-disclosure world, nothing is happening. We have utterly failed. We cannot deal with the nuclear weapons issue, the nuclear armaments issue, and reduction of arms. We cannot deal with it. It is a complete failure. And so at any day now, it's over. We've been living that way so long, we've gotten used to it. It's like the Pompeians and the Herculeans. They were living next to that volcano. They got used to it. It's like, it looks a little weird, but, we got used to it. And then one day it exploded. And because they were so used to it, they took way too long getting out of town. We're in the same exact boat. We have been living next to the nuclear arms volcano now for 74 years. And when it finally goes off, hardly anybody is going to get out of town. So we have got to deal with it, and we can't. And what I have said countless times over the last years is that the first opportunity to actually deal with the situation that we created starts the day after disclosure. And that's why disclosure needs to happen. That's why it should have happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or even back in 1996. When Rockefeller made the move and Clinton went to the DOD and the Air Force and said, I need help here, I need files. And they told him to go to hell, and the Air Force created a $12 million fake report describing Roswell as not a raw wind balloon, but a mogul balloon. And this is a disgrace that will be on the historical record of Air Force Secretary Sheila Whitnall until the end of time.
Yeah.
I'm not throwing shade here. She actually was a brilliant woman and the first woman Secretary of the Air Force. Quite a legacy, but she was the head of the Air Force when that report was made. That's what happened then. Now it is 25 years later, and the nuclear arms situation has gotten worse. Every year, we're closer to nuclear war than ever, but we are on the verge of disclosure. That's what's going on, Vinnie. I appreciate your patience. I had no short answer.
I'm just here, but happy to speak to you, my friend. So
okay, I'll tell you what. I'm willing to give you some time for some rapid questions. In other words, if you've got something that has a short question, I will actually give you a short answer if there's anything on your plate. If not, we can wrap it up. What do you got? Anything? Like how is it that I look this good at this age? I mean, something easy I can answer.
You literally got to within the very end of my list. So what I will say is, what's next for you and the Paradigm Research Group? Assuming the plan that you just gave us kind of starts to flow, is there anything else you're going to do? Are you just going to keep pushing? Are you involved with, are you able to push this forward anymore?
Thank you for answering that. I appreciate it. I have a major announcement I will be making either at the end of this month or the first 10 days of October.
Nice.
And then you will know what I'm going to be doing.
Excellent.
Okay? Great. So sorry I can't go more into it now. There are reasons for that. But I'm teasing people to death because, hey, that's what you do, right? On the internet, first you tease them until they're crazy, and then you hit them with the real thing, and then you pound away at that until it's a meme, and then you go viral, and you're an influencer. That's what you do. So it starts with the tease. So there's the tease. End of this month, early October. Pretty major announcement from Paradigm Research Group.
That's fantastic, and we look forward to it. But literally, you've covered everything I had. I didn't even need to revert to my notes. So listen, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me, first of all, and for giving us your breakdown and rundown and everything dating back in history right up until now. I am just going to take this moment, though, to give a shout out to one particular follower who has been making a couple of donations throughout. Guy Springthorpe, thank you so much for the support. I appreciate you, my man. So thank you so much for the support. Steve, let's do this in the future. Let's see how this progresses. And maybe we'll be having a different conversation a few months down the line. Fingers crossed.
Of course. Now, my website is Paradigm Research Group.
Everything's linked below in the description.
It's down there. You can sign up for the free mail list. There's a contribution page. Also, if you go into the resources and the issues issue, you can find a section that has 1,000 linked articles earmarked in red about all the stuff we just talked about, TTSA and all the things that are, and 1,000 of them. You can also find a section that's got 160 video clips relating to the TTSA and Louis Elizondo and Mellon and other witnesses that have come forward. That's 160. I hope to add another 50 to 60 soon. So there's enormous resources for there. People want to get up to speed, and deal with the cognitive dissonance that they're feeling right now as they're going, I don't get this. So I invite you to do that and support Vinnie and support everybody in this field. And remember, you want to make friends, not enemies, as the biggest event in human history approaches.
Absolutely.
I'm out.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Bye.
Until the next time, my friend, I appreciate you. All the best. And to everyone watching, I will see you on the next one. Thank you so much for your support.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, mate.